Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Stuart A. Swerdlow.
And Janet Diane Moria Swerdlow.
And this is the Expansions News podcast for the very last day of March and the first week of April 2019. And there's been, not so much interesting news this week. It's just a couple of things that I have for you to discuss. And of course, one of the big deals was that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, 2-year investigation of possible collusion by President Donald Trump and his associates with regard to Russian interests and the 2016 election has come to a conclusion, as most people understand by now, that there was no evidence to support any such charge. And President Trump was completely exonerated by special counsel after the 2-year investigation and found not only no collusion and no evidence of obstruction of justice. Now, according to the White House, this is great news for the country and bad news for the Democratic leadership who spent the last 2 years lying to Americans only because they couldn't accept the results of the 2016 election. It continues to say their shameful obsession with the collusion narrative and blind hatred for President Trump meant millions of taxpayer dollars were wasted in search of a non-existent crime. It all started with a phony, unverified dossier paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. And the ensuing investigation cost over $25 million, or an average of $50,230 per day, with at least 19 attorneys working on Mueller's staff. And so President Trump has been exonerated, and he has also called for Representative Adam Schiff of California to resign for lying for 2 years and creating problems just because they tried to get Hillary Clinton to get back into office. So the media and celebrities need to apologize and stay out of politics because, you know, people like Bette Midler and all the talk show hosts and so on who have repeatedly added their 3 cents in. Your job is to entertain people, not be in politics.
Well, maybe they think that is entertaining people.
No, it's causing problems, and I think that they're actually being set up and paid to do it. Just like recently, Alex Jones created a big problem in a Texas restaurant where they laughed at him and basically made him leave. And then he went on a television show and an interview and said that his belief in the conspiracies, especially in the Sandy Hook Sabbath crime, he said that it was part of a psychosis that he had. Yes, he has a psychosis. It's called lying. And he's a shill. And I knew that when I worked with him on the Jesse Ventura show. Anyway, going on to Middle East and Washington, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu told President Trump that Israel has never had a better friend than him, than President Trump. And that was during a ceremony where President Trump signed a formal recognition of Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights. The Israeli leader cited Trump's withdrawal from former President Barack Obama's Iran nuclear deal and his decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And the White House is waiting for the election in Israel on April 9th to see who is the winner. And this will, after the election, the plans to release the Israel-Palestinian peace deal, a project of the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who said the proposal will be unveiled after the Israeli election. And of course, while President, or I should say Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Washington, from Gaza, the Hamas terrorist organization sent rockets into Israel near Tel Aviv, and so he cut short his visit and went back to Israel. Now, just so that you know, and if you had been in my September class or my January class, you would know, that the Golan Heights have always been part of Israel, and in fact were part of the Kingdom of Israel for almost 3,000 years. And it was the Arabs who stole it from the Jews when they invaded the Middle East in the 600s and 700s. So it does not belong to Syria, and it never did. And my last story, which is interesting, is that NASA revealed that a glacier that was once the fastest shrinking ice snowmass on Earth has now made an unexpected comeback. It's in Greenland, and it's called Jakobshavn. And it started growing again in the past 2 years. And in fact, they found the glacier is now thickening and advancing towards the ocean instead of retreating inland. And the water temperature in the vicinity of the glacier is now lower than it's been in the last 30 years. That doesn't sound like global warming to me.
But I'm surprised that they even released that information.
Because, hello, if you go to Greenland, if you fly over, you say, hey, it's all full of ice. What are they talking about?
Yeah, but most people aren't going to fly over Greenland.
Well, we went there and we saw that in the middle of July it was over our head snow. So, come on. And they said persistent cold this past winter is persistent with what's been going on. And this is my favorite line. They said that this turnaround staged by Jakobshavn is kind of a surprise. Well, not if you had been telling the truth for the last 15 years, because I bet it's a surprise to all those nimnods who believed in global warming. And, well, I would expect that to happen when an ice age is coming, like I told everybody it is coming.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I've got some very interesting news.
Well, I hope so.
Ton of interesting news. In fact, this I was just reading about yesterday, that it says Mexico is bracing for the mother of all caravans, which is forming in Central America. Did you read about that?
Yes, and I have opinion on that.
Yeah, and they said that the estimates report 20,000 people in the caravan. And this apparently was reported by Interior Secretary Olga Sanchez Cordero. She said that this caravan will be from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and it could be forming with more than 20,000 people.
Yeah, and there's also people from Iraq and Iran and all kinds of terrorist countries going on in there too.
But what's interesting is a WhatsApp group which called for people to gather in El Salvador recently to set off for Guatemala only had 206 members. An activist, Ireneo Mujica, who has accompanied several caravans in Mexico, said that the mother of all caravans reports was actually false. And he claimed this is information that U.S. Homeland Security Secretary is using to create fear. His group, Pueblos Sin Fronteras, said in a statement there's no evidence that the new caravan would be that large, and saying there's never been a caravan of that size before. And in fact, even those that have been 7,000 strong have encountered very serious logistical hurdles. He said that the administration of the U.S. may be trying to fan fears of a big caravan to turn the national agenda back to the immigration issue. And Honduran activist Bartolo Fuentes, who accompanied a large caravan last year, also said that it was part of the U.S. government's plans made up to justify their actions. Honduras Deputy Foreign Minister Nelly Jerez last week denied that a mother of all caravans was forming in her country because she said this type of information promotes that people leave the country. So I guess she wants people in the country. And then it said a caravan of about 2,500 Central Americans and Cubans is currently making its way through Mexico's southern state of Chiapas. And it said that Mexico appears to be both tiring of the caravans and eager not to anger the U.S., stopping and no longer grants migrants humanitarian visas at the border, and towns along the well-traveled route to Mexico City often do not allow the caravans to spend the night anymore.
You know, I was in Mexico City twice in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And it's just normal. Business is normal in Mexico City.
Well, not really, because you made the volcano go off.
I did make the volcano go off, yeah.
And it said that the Mexican President Obrador said that Mexico is doing its part to fight immigrant smuggling. And he says we're doing everything we can to do to help. We do not want to confront the U.S. government. And it is...
Look, may I just say something? Then close the border with Guatemala and don't let them in.
Well, that's what they're saying, that they formed a line of containment around Mexico's narrow Tehuantepec Isthmus to stop migrants from continuing north to the U.S. border. So they're doing their best to stop it at this point. So I thought, anyway, so that was interesting. Again, here we go with all this. Now... Remember last week I reported on junk DNA and then about regenerating limbs. Well, guess what? Junk DNA is in the news again. Mm-hmm. Now, this was kind of interesting to me because, you know, I have been aware that there are people who do not feel pain in life. I mean, I've heard about that. And
I'd like to be one of them.
When I studied psychology many, many years ago, they talked about people who a lot of times they had no feeling, and so they didn't know when they were
They're so lucky.
Or burned or whatever. Mm-hmm. But now they're making it, excuse me,
You shouldn't smoke before you do a podcast.
They're making a big deal about this woman in Scotland who's 71 and lived a life without pain. So they go on to talk about how she experienced childbirth, broken limbs, cut burns, surgeries with little or no discomfort, and didn't even know she was burning until she smelled.
She was in Scotland?
Yeah, Scotland.
I think maybe she had a little bit too much, liquid.
But the issue is that I've been aware of this, but they're making it sound like this is something new, but it's not. And they have to bring in that she's vegan. So...
Well, they have no feeling anyway.
I can't imagine.
They have no blood.
A 71-year-old in Scotland being vegan, but that's what they're claiming.
Mm-hmm.
I think
no haggis for her.
I just think they just threw that in. So she said that there's no flesh cooking in the house, so obviously it's her skin. That's what she said. Well, anyway, researchers now are investigating her case, and so of course they found 2 gene mutations in her DNA. And then also weirdly, because she says she didn't become aware of her condition until her mid-60s, which I don't believe that.
That's baloney.
Either.
That's when she probably sobered up.
Well, I don't know. But anyway, so they found these gene mutations called FAAH, OUT, which was presumed to be junk DNA, and that controls an enzyme known as FAAH. Those are the 2 gene mutations, and they want to study it to help people who do have pain. So, but anyway, again, they're starting to label what's in your junk DNA. Before they said it was like not worth anything. Now they're saying it's worth something. So 2 stories right in a row. We guess we'll watch for a third. But I thought that was kind of fascinating that they brought it up. And then speaking of DNA, we have talked for quite some time about them bringing back the woolly mammoths, right?
I like the woolly mammoths.
Well, now, and these stories, they keep appearing.
They already are back. They
Right.
never went away anyway.
So they keep appearing. But what's interesting is they found the best preserved woolly mammoth in Siberia. And guess what they named the mammoth?
Stuart?
Close. Yucca.
Oh.
Because remember, we have our Yakutian Lycas from Yakutia. And now we have this mammoth named Yucca. Was found in August 2010. And they took a muscle cell nuclei from this mammoth carcass and put it into a mouse ova.
A mouse.
A mouse.
Giving birth to an elephant.
Where they watched signs of biological activity taking place, and they consider this a milestone activity.
Mm-hmm. I've heard this for 20 years.
At least. And then they said because Yucca's cell nuclei was more damaged than they thought, it was going to be difficult to resurrect mammoth as things stand.
They already have them.
Okay, so with this story in mind, it linked to another story which was absolutely the most fascinating one. Because this has to do with Save the Earth programming, because now, this was actually back in May of 2018, it says scientists want to create elephant-mammoth hybrid to save humanity from the Arctic methane time bomb.
How are they going to do that?
Okay, so what they claim is because there are no large mammals down there pressing down and scraping back thick layers of winter snow.
Just stop. This is just so bizarre, ridiculous.
It is.
This is something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would think of.
Yeah, so anyway, so apparently that prevents the cold from penetrating the soil, which is stupid because obviously the soil up there is frozen, right?
Yeah, to get a billion elephants trampling down the soil to prevent gas to come.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
So they said now with warmer summers, which of course isn't what you were talking about in
no.
Greenland, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the warmer summers, they're claiming the Arctic permafrost is melting. And so therefore, it's packed, they claim the frozen soil is packed with leaves and organic materials that have not decayed. So when they become exposed, they will release carbon into the atmosphere in the form of greenhouse gases, of carbon dioxide and methane. And this is known as the methane time bomb, which could create levels of carbon equivalent to burning all of the world's forests 2.5 times over.
That's such baloney.
I don't believe this at all, but it's interesting what they're telling you and what people are going to believe.
No, because that's right, because people are stupid and they believe everything.
Yeah, so what they're telling you is then they want to grow these elephant mammoth hybrids and send them to the Arctic.
Right, and suck up all the gas. Brilliant.
So anyway, I just thought that was pretty crazy.
Whoever thought of that needs to suck up some gas.
I just thought it was totally crazy. And then they said, of course, that the results will be many years away, but they claim that it's a decade-old research, which of course we know it's a lot longer than that, because as you said, they've never gone away. And they're going to breed these mammoths without tusks, so people don't poach them, and also so they can eat more vegetation.
So they're going to make hybrids that are not natural, that can't survive because they don't have their parts included with them?
Well, they're going to include blood that's adapted to the cold, long hair, and thick layers of fat so they can live further north. But what we all know is if we have an issue here, with global cooling, we'll say, so perhaps, it's for another reason, but this is what they're telling you. So they always tell you something. You just have to read between the lines.
Where did that information come from? What country?
Well, it's a Harvard geneticist, George Church. So I guess the U.S.
Harvard, so he's part of the deep state.
Yeah. So anyway, just interesting what they're telling you, what they're going to do, and the stories they tell. So you've got to learn to read between the lies, right? Now, this was also interesting to me because we talked before about the time change that's going on. Well, now the EU votes to stop moving the clocks twice a year. But the catch is that countries can just, they call them states, but the countries of the EU can choose whether they want to go on summertime permanently or wintertime permanently.
Oh, that's brilliant. So the people in the East, if they want to go on one time that's an hour behind the Western time, that'd make a lot of sense.
But they can do either. One country right next to another could do
just
different.
Stupid.
Yeah.
Which is the EU is stupid.
So then it said apparently, which I didn't realize, you probably did, but Russia moved to permanent summertime in 2011.
Yeah, they don't change the clocks.
And it is to summertime. That's not the correct time. In an attempt to improve citizens' well-being, but then because of complaints in 2014, they changed it to permanent winter time. So, but my point is
just leave the clocks where they are.
But they're still
and
playing.
Don't change them.
They're still playing with the clocks. So even though they're making you think they're not, they still are. That's my point. Okay? And then this next story I thought was a bit bizarre, because to me it's about glorifying violence, and which I don't, believe in that, obviously. So, you all know about El Chapo, the drug lord from Mexico. His real name is Joaquin Guzman. He's 61 years old. Apparently, his wife is 29 and they have 7-year-old twin daughters. Well, he, while in prison, signed a contract from his cell in Manhattan granting the rights to his name and signature to a limited liability company that will be headed up by his wife, officially called El Chapo Guzman, and will launch a line of caps this summer, which will be followed by ready-to-wear. So in other words, they're glorifying his name. Drug dealers. Putting it on caps, and soon, and anybody can buy it. And of course it says he's not going to be making any money, but obviously his wife is, and children and family and anybody else. So they're glorifying violence, and in my opinion, they should not glorify crime, and they should not allow people to make money off of doing things like this, because it keeps it in everybody's head.
That means somebody else is making money, that's why.
Well, somebody's going to make a lot of money from this, unfortunately. And then, this was also interesting to me. It's a freedom of speech type of issue, in my opinion. And this happened back in December, that there was an evangelical preacher, 42 years old, named John O'Neill in the UK, who was preaching the gospel at Braehead Shopping Centre near Glasgow. Okay, so apparently he was arrested and accused of behaving in a threatening and abusive manner because he was telling children that Santa is a lie. But he was arrested for that.
Scotland, remember?
Okay, Scotland. Well, I still don't think he should have been arrested for that. And he said, I have a right to speak the truth, and preaching the gospel upsets people, therefore I should stop preaching the gospel, ? They claim that he said that all children will go to hell, but he said he never believed that. They do what?
Go to hell.
So, anyway, the sheriff, this is the thing that got me more than anything, was his sentence, the sentencing, what she said. Now, he has a deferred sentence for 3 months, no big deal. But she's giving him a chance to behave, and she says his behavior could cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm. Now, to me, that's stupid.
That's what they say about me.
Saying that there's no Santa Claus and Santa is a lie could cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm. In my opinion, that's like bizarre.
He should be a Democrat.
Bizarre. Okay, and then speaking of religion, the Pope was in the news again. Because apparently they have a video, which I saw, of him jerking his hand away from worshippers. And it was very... they made sure you saw it, and they made sure it was on the news. So I always wonder, okay, why did they do that? And it was just very bizarre. And then 2 days later, he allowed the nuns and priests to kiss his ring. And apparently, the ring is a symbol of the Pope's union to the church. So kissing the ring, which bears a silver cross, is a traditional sign of respect. So why wouldn't you let the parishioners kiss his ring, right?
Because he's afraid of their little germs.
Well, I don't know, but then he let the nuns and priests do it.
Because they've been purified by the Lord.
Apparently his ring is known as the fisherman's ring from the Apostle Peter, who was a fisherman and the first pope. And his version is a gold-plated silver ring and depicts St. Peter holding the keys of the Holy See. And apparently each pope picks his own ring, which is then destroyed at the end of his papacy, and that signifies the conclusion of his reign.
Don't they just bury him with it?
I don't know. But anyway, I just thought that was strange. Why do you think they wouldn't, that he was
Because
doing
probably
that?
the ring is possessed by an astral entity and they only want to keep it for their little family.
Maybe so. But anyway, very strange. And then this was, I think, my best story ever. So, well, ever for today. So it says that the researchers, scientists, gathered in Paris this past week for the Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence International meeting, which apparently is held every other year in Paris. And they're questioning what is known as the Fermi Paradox. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
This means, and the Fermi Paradox is, quote unquote, where is everybody?
They've been here.
So, these researchers are saying that the reason that we're not seeing extraterrestrials, because they're claiming intelligent beings are quietly watching humankind in a galactic zoo
Right.
to protect us from the distressing truth of their
Right,
existence.
they're protecting us, right?
Yeah, because people can't handle it, and that's the truth. I happen to agree with what they're
I feel
doing.
very protected.
Yeah. So they are saying that aliens found us first, and they're intentionally hiding themselves and helping us to protect our cultural identity. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's also very stupid and a lie.
No, I think that they're not.
They're helping protect our cultural identity.
Well, no, they're hiding because the average person can't take it.
Do they give an FU what?
I'm just telling you, I happen to think that's possible. It says that they're imposing a galactic quarantine
Well, that makes sense.
because they realize it could be culturally disruptive
no,
for
it's
us to
because
learn about them.
this is a dangerous place. That's why.
No, but they don't care. The ones who are here don't care. They're already
That's just a
navigating.
BS story.
It's a good story. I like that one. That's my favorite.
Well, that tells me a lot about you.
That's my favorite story. So anyway, with that said, I want to remind everybody that it's April, which means we're starting our second to the last session of webinars, self-healing webinars, Affirming You. We have 2 more sessions, April and May, so you want to be sure and join those. And then, of course, my trip to Italy, my Clear Health and Healing Tour. If you have not read True World History about the Waldensian people, we are going to be walking the trails of the ancient Waldensians, and it's a fascinating, fascinating tour. This will be our 4th or 5th year doing it. And I don't know if we'll be doing it next year or not, but for now you have an opportunity to go, 1 seat in the van, and we have a private car going, which may be able to take 1 or 2 people. And of course we have our healing Hyperspace Plus, and I just this one just got reprinted, so if you've been waiting, we now have them. Healing Archetypes and Symbols, and of course Galactic History, which is what they're telling about in the news now, which was written a lot of years ago, maybe about 20 years ago, but this one's our bestseller actually. And of course lots of other things that will help you get on with your life, right? And then what?
Well, probably by the time some of you see this, I'll be on my way to the Bahamas.
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
Very big,
Is that a
yeah.
public thing that we can hear, or
No,
is it going to be recorded?
It's
or?
for the Bahamas and the Caribbean people.
Ah, darn.
And then
Sounds like a fascinating one.
Then Istanbul is supposed to be in May. And Nevis, the big event in October with Steven Seagal, is end of October.
In September, unless we combine that September class with October, we haven't decided.
I don't know.
We'll figure it
Too
out.
much at once.
Yeah, we'll figure
And
it out.
then, of course, we have new books that you've just finished editing and being laid out and ready to be published.
Soon. So within the next few months, we will have 2, possibly 3 books. That's our goal.
3
See how it
should
works.
be.
We're praying that the 3rd one gets there.
Well, whose fault is that?
It's nobody's fault, dear. And then
Who
you're
hasn't
also.
finished editing?
It's also why is it such a trouble for me to edit in the first place? Let's start
Because
about
you are
that.
very difficult to work with.
Yeah, that must be it. And remember, there will be a sequel to this, which this will be our 4th book, which will be out before the end of the year. So,
Oh, yeah.
you recognize it?
Yeah,
I thought so. It even matches your shirt today.
it does.
Yeah,
Well, kind of.
kinda. Oh, hey, look at that. It even matches me. But look at that. We're color coordinated. Who knew? All right, so anyway, so there's a sequel for this. So if you haven't read this one, this should be on. If you're interested in mind control and programming, and please do not call yourself a targeted individual, because that makes it. And all these groups that are out there who are targeted individuals is ridiculous.
Nobody's attacking you. Well, they are attacking people in general, but you're not specifically you.
Right. So basic deprogramming exercises here, and on our website, remember, our membership, less than $1 a day, we have all our mind control and deprogramming videos that will be helpful. We have study guides that will be helpful. So nobody can do anything to you. You have to do it to yourself. Remember that.
Or you allow them to do it to you.
Yes, exactly. So that's
Just
it.
like I allows you to microaggress me.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's it. Everybody feels so sorry for you.
They should.
Yeah. So
anyway,
I'm done.
I'll see you. Actually, I'll be back next week. Yeah. The Bahamas just 3 days, and
you'll be back.
Unless I decide to just stay there.
Yeah, maybe.
You never know.
Never know.
Bye for now.
Bye.